Right now, there are several viral articles alleging that a NATO chief has suggested NATO will strike Russia first. Likely not real. What it seems to be is that this individual said if Russia launches missiles against NATO, NATO would respond then by striking Russian launch sites. This is being conflated as a preemptive attack against Russia, but they are saying only in the event Russia attacks us. Now, we have heard that the UK and France are considering sending European troops into Ukraine to engage this war directly. I don't think anybody with any reasonable sense considers this to just be Russia versus Ukraine at this point especially. But what is particularly alarming are the numerous articles about how FEMA has issued a nuclear attack survival guide. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're paying attention. Now, it could just be that they release these periodically, and they do. They released them in 2018. There's one from 2023. I found these. So this could just be media fear-mongering. But my friends, there are many reports suggesting that the escalation is upon us. Russia is suggesting they could strike NATO countries because NATO is basically who's backing this war in Ukraine. Sure, the bodies are private volunteers of people all over the world. A lot of Americans, not as many as Ukrainians, but Russia does not consider this to just be Ukraine. And the question then becomes, would Russia be willing to use nuclear artillery, low-yield nuclear weapons ranging from about a kiloton or so, if it means shutting down the Ukrainian offensive into Kursk and the attacks on Bryansk with these ATACMS missiles that they've now used several times? I can't tell you. I don't know. All I can tell you is that I read various news reports, and Russia is reporting that NATO is threatening preemptive strikes. Of course, that's the game they're going to play. We'll start here with this story from Daily Star. World War III fears as nuclear warning from U.S. government highlights area 15 minutes from disaster. The U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency has issued a chilling guide on how to survive a nuclear attack as global tensions rise amid the conflict in Ukraine and Middle Eastern disputes grow more heated. There's also been reports that Russia is not only recruiting North Koreans to fight in this war, but people from Yemen as well. They are going to start pulling in many fighters from various parts of the world because they don't intend to lose. Now, the question is, why do they not escalate much more dramatically? We don't know. There are concerns that 2 undersea cables were just severed by a Chinese vessel as an act of sabotage. Good luck, my friends. I hope as long as we are reading this news, you are just prepared for the worst. I hope that y'all hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Here's a story from the Daily Star. As global tensions mount, U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency has released a spine-chilling survival guide for a nuclear attack amid the escalating Ukraine conflict. Echoing Cold War-era preparedness, the agency's updated advice aims to shield Americans from the horrors of a nuclear explosion. A nuclear simulation grimly tallies the death toll should Russia target Washington, D.C. with a nuke. The numbers are staggering, reports the Irish Star. FEMA's somber instructions are stark. Nuclear explosions can cause significant damage and casualties from blast, heat, and radiation, but you can keep your family safe by knowing what to do and being prepared if it occurs, underscoring the critical nature of this knowledge for survival. Now, we have this one from MSN.com. It's Dagens, India. NATO will hit Russian launch sites if Putin makes the first move. And I think this is important because a lot of people are reporting that Putin is threatening that NATO is threatening a first strike. Does not appear to be the case. I've looked into it, and it appears that this guy Bauer, I believe his name is, Admiral Rob Bauer, chairman of NATO's military committee, said, if they launch missiles at us, we intercept those missiles, we strike their targets. Meaning, if Russia attacks NATO first, this is not a preemptive strike. It is still particularly worrying. They report NATO would respond to any Russian attack by targeting Russian launch sites, though it has no intention of striking first. This was stated by Admiral Rob Bauer, chairman of NATO's military committee, during a discussion at the European Policy Center. Bauer addressed the need for NATO countries to invest more in air defense and long-range strike capabilities, citing the ongoing threat from Russia. He welcomed NATO's growing emphasis on long-range systems, calling it a necessary shift in strategy. Quote, previously, as a defensive alliance, our approach was to wait until we were attacked, then intercept missiles. However, it's more effective to not only intercept, but also strike the launchers in Russia if we are attacked. He added, it's smarter to neutralize the threat at its source rather than just react. If Russia attacks, targeting their launchers would be essential to protect alliance members. While reiterating NATO's defensive stance, Bauer acknowledged that taking preemptive measures in response to an imminent attack could be crucial. Despite the heightened rhetoric, Bauer noted that Russia's military capabilities have been weakened after more than 2 years of war. He described Russia as less of a threat to NATO than it was in February. As part of its preparations for potential conflict with Russia, NATO has assigned Estonia a key role in its strategic framework. Estonia is tasked with enhancing its long-range strike capabilities, focusing on potential targets within Russia. Major General Vahir Karus, chief of the Estonian Defense Forces, emphasized the importance of pinpointing specific targets to safeguard NATO's eastern flank. And of course, Russian state TV host threatens strikes on NATO countries. I always love it when it's Russian TV doing this, as if like, I don't know, Anderson Cooper would go on TV and be like, oh, we're going to do this or that, or otherwise, I'm telling you, Russia. It shows you the difference between the U.S. and Russian media. Russian state media is, it's Russian government. I know we talk about the corporate press in this country, but there is still at least some minor distinction. To be fair, though, MSNBC, and CNN do like to bring in a lot of deep state retirees to commentate on these shows, and many of them do very much the same, saying the U.S. would do this, they will do this. So, you know, not the hosts themselves, but they may as well be. Now, my friends, I can't make predictions about what happens. Maybe Trump gets into office and this stops. I certainly hope so. But I'm going to give a shout out to safeandreadymeals.com. Many of you already have these. If you don't, I recommend them because we have a bunch. I'm not going to say how many because you shouldn't. But these are 25-year emergency food buckets. The left and liberals would mock you, would mock me, and they say, haha, you're buying food in case of emergencies. And I'm just like, oh, okay. It's the weirdest thing ever. When I first pitched these, liberals went nuts laughing. And I'm like, you have no emergency preparedness? I'm not telling you to buy 30 years worth of beans or anything and go live in a bunker. I'm saying you get a couple of these food buckets because sometimes it rains. You know what I mean? And sometimes the roads get shut down or the power goes out or you get caught in a hurricane and you're going to be happy that you have emergency supplies. Considering we're talking about war, I rarely do promo spots for safeandreadymeals.com. Considering the uncertainty we're facing and the fear of dramatic escalation, I recommend it. I recommend it. And so I will mention this. It looks like prices are actually stable a little bit because these things sometimes get expensive based on what the prices are going to be. But consider it at safeandreadymeals.com. When we've got stories about war or pandemics or whatever it may be, I just got to tell you, my friends, you get a couple of these buckets, you put them in the closet, you forget about them for 25 years. You don't worry about it. You know, you got a first aid kit, right? Do you know where it is? I ask this question to a lot of people because they don't. They don't know where their first aid kit is. But why do they have it? How often do you use it? Well, you might need it. You'll be happy that you have it. Newsweek reports Russian state TV propagandist Vladimir Solovyov has warned that Russian President Vladimir Putin may soon order strikes on European NATO members as Moscow's war with Ukraine continues. The Russia-Ukraine war has recently escalated following Joe Biden's decision authorizing Kiev to use U.S.-made weapons to strike targets inside Russia. Now, this is where things are absolutely insane. Let me see if I can pull up the Ukraine war map right here. So you've got the main offensive, which is basically Russia seizing. This is the oblasts of Luhansk, Donetsk, Mariupol, Zaporizhia. I could be wrong. I am not, I'm not. So it's not Zaporizhia. Is it Zaporizhia? Yeah. I believe this, or they say Melitopol is the city. You've got Kherson. Russia seems to have seized this whole region because they want to control the Sea of Azov and access to Sevastopol. If we look up here, we can see the Kharkiv offensive and the Kursk incursion, areas where Ukraine is striking into Russia. The questions are, why? Honest question. I mean, I don't know. Take a look at this. This is not near the main offensive. Could it be that the Ukrainians, the West, it's not just Ukraine, are trying to, with strikes on Bryansk and Kursk, force Russia to redirect its military to defend these areas? I got to say, it's not looking good for Ukraine. Now, they keep saying this stuff. You had Klitschko the other day. He said, Putin's war was supposed to be 3 days. it is 3 years. And it's like, sure. I mean, but if he controls the entire Donbass region into the land, into Crimea, all the way down into Crimea and the Sea of Azov, seems like he won. You're just still fighting in other areas. It looks like it's just been good for Putin. Not that I like him. The question then arises with the use of ATACMS on Russian territory. These are U.S. missiles. With Russia launching intermediate-range ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, they say the U.S. has no countermeasures. Does this escalate into nuclear war? Well, we talked about it a bit last night on the Members Only show, and I believe the concern is the use of tactical nuclear weapons, artillery, low-yield nuclear weapons to shut down these areas. So as we were discussing it last night, my statement was, if Russia feels like there is an incursion into Russian territory that they can't control, and these missiles are being launched, they will flatten these launch points. Now, the rebuttal was, yes, but they use HIMARS, high mobility sites. So these are vehicles that can move around and launch. Yes, but if the concern, I suppose, and largely not necessarily my opinions, because I just read the news, and this is what people are saying in corporate press and in media and various news sources. If Russia were to use tactical nuclear artillery in and around these areas, irradiating it or just making it, unnavigable, or however you'd want to describe it, they're not going to be moving in these directions. That is, Russia could flatten these areas inside of Ukraine near Sumy so that the Ukrainians are not mobile in that area, to put it lightly. I don't know for sure, but I'll give you the brief overview. PBS says, unlike nuclear-tipped intercontinental ballistic missiles that can destroy entire cities, tactical nuclear weapons for use against troops on the battlefield are less powerful and can have a yield as small as about 1 kiloton. The U.S. bomb dropped in Hiroshima during World War II was 15 kilotons. Such battlefield nuclear weapons, aerial bombs, warheads, or short-range missiles, or artillery munitions can be very compact. Their small size allows them to be discreetly carried on a truck or plane. Unlike strategic weapons, which have been subject to arms control agreements between Moscow and Washington, tactical weapons have never been limited by any such pacts. And Russia hasn't released their numbers or any other specifics related to them. Since launching the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia's President Putin has repeatedly reminded Western nations about Moscow's nuclear might. Well, right now, they are using intermediate-range ballistic missiles. They've started. And it looks like these are not multiple independently targeting re-entry vehicles, but multiple re-entry vehicles, because the videos we've seen show multiple warheads. Now, people are pointing out, this is crazy. I don't know a lot about it, but these are kinetic weapons. So basically massive bullets, just gigantic metal rods. I don't know enough about it, but that seems nuts. Basically, this rocket goes in the air and then it launches these. It blows up when it hits the ground because of the energy, but it's not an explosive in and of itself. Now, we have this from the National Interest. Putin isn't bluffing. Could Russia test a tactical nuclear weapon? Maybe. And that's the concern. Nuclear artillery. Utilizing howitzers or whatever the Russian equivalent, whatever you'd call them is, launching nuclear artillery, nuclear munitions from these artillery on the battlefield. They could. The question is, why don't they? And I think it's a matter of escalation. Russia's probably concerned that if they escalate too quickly, the rebuttal will be too quick. And they're hoping to keep things at a certain level. The West is certainly trying to as well. Now, we had this conversation, as I mentioned last night. Ian said that if Russia uses nuclear weapons, the whole globe will go against them. And that's just absolutely not true. China's already been providing resources to Russia. You've got North Korea entering the fray, 10,000 troops, upwards of 100,000 could be sent. Russia is recruiting from Yemen. If Russia were to use a nuclear weapon, first of all, they could deny it was them. And that's where things get scary. War is not just like Russia marching on a battlefield and then saying, time to fire the nukes. Well, they wouldn't say Z nukes. They'd say, fire the nuclear weapons or whatever. And if they did, if nukes were actually used, and these are low-yield things, I guarantee you, the first thing we likely see is both sides claiming the other side did it first. And then what do? Interests are at play. And depending on who Russia's aligned with, China might not just sit around and be like, yeah, we're going to side with the U.S. on this. And that makes no sense. Let's say a nuke is used. in Ukraine. Detonation. Hits an area just outside of Kursk or whatever. It just hits the battlefield. Kills a lot of people on both sides. Russia says the West has started using nuclear weapons. The West says Russia is using nuclear weapons. Then what do? It is not so simple, because once that bomb goes off, once that artillery is fired, then you're going to have both sides claiming casus belli for engagement. Russia's going to say, look, we are not doing this. They're the aggressors. The West is going to say Russia's the one who invaded in the first place. But it doesn't matter who's right. It's war. The left is going to tell you, the liberals, the war machine in this country, and neocons are going to say, we are justified in joining this war. We must do it. Of course they will. I don't see why we're involved. I don't see why we should escalate this conflict over Ukraine. They've not justified their position. When Kamala Harris was asked, she says, Russia is a big country and Ukraine's a small country and Russia attacked the small country. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a reason for me to want to be involved in this international conflict some 8,000 miles away. But hey, here we are. From Euromaidan Press, top NATO official urges leaders to get ready for wartime scenario after Russia threatened retaliation for Ukraine strikes at its territory. NATO's Rob Bauer calls on industries to adjust production lines for operating under wartime conditions. Oh, boy. Russia says Ukraine hit it with U.S.-made ATACMS twice in the last 3 days. It said both strikes targeted Russian forces' positions in the Kursk region. The first one took place on November 23rd, and 2 out of 5 missiles launched at a Russian S-400 air defense system hit the target, damaging its radar systems. In the second attack on November 25th, 8 missiles were aimed at the Kursk Vostokny, can't pronounce that probably, airport, which also hosts a military airbase. 1 missile reached the target, wounding 2 soldiers, the ministry said in a statement. The ministry is in control of the situation, and retaliatory measures are being prepared. At what point do we get hit? Putin ally issues nuclear warning to U.S. Here we go. I believe this was Belarus. This is an ally of Russian President Putin has issued a nuclear warning to the U.S. in a post on Telegram. Dmitry Medvedev, okay, so this is just Russia, criticized discussions around transferring nuclear weapons from the U.S. to Ukraine. In his post on Telegram, Medvedev wrote, American politicians and journalists are seriously discussing the consequences of transferring nuclear weapons to Kiev. It seems that my sad joke about crazy senile Biden, who decided to leave this life gracefully, taking a significant part of humanity with him, is turning into a frightening reality. Give nuclear weapons to a country at war with the largest nuclear power? The idea is so absurd that it raises suspicions about a paranoid psychosis in Joe the Walking Dead and those who would advise such a move. He continued, yet I must comment on the nonsense. The very threat of transferring nuclear weapons to the Kiev regime can be considered preparation for nuclear conflict with Russia. The actual transfer of such weapons can be equated to an act of attack on our country under Article 19 of the Fundamentals of State Policy in the field of nuclear deterrence. The consequences are obvious. Should the West actually transfer nukes to Kiev? Yeah, I don't see how Russia sits by. Now, I suppose what we are concerned with is whether the red line is real. Russia keeps saying there's a red line, and it seems there isn't one. Everyone agrees. Russia does seem to be in a weakened state. I don't think that's grounds for an expansion or an escalation of what Ukraine is doing. That is to say, Russia's repeatedly said, if you do this, be warned, we will strike back. And then they don't. We're not at the point where Ukraine is launching U.S.-made ATACMS missiles into Russia, targeting civilian areas. They had to evacuate 100,000 civilians. Where's the red line, Putin? Doesn't seem to be one. In which case, the West seems emboldened. They're going to keep pressing Putin. Now, this is where the concern comes in. There is a red line. Putin facing defeat. With Israel, they call it the Samson option. They say that if Israel faces an existential threat from its warring neighbors, it'll use a nuke, which many believe it has, or more than one. That if they are facing their own death, they will blow up their enemies. Would Putin not do the same thing? Should Russia face collapse of government, which Putin would view as an existential threat, would he not say, let it be? I don't know. I wouldn't call it mutually assured destruction. because there was this viral story where a member of parliament said no one's going. What's this city in Poland? Let me make sure I get the city right, because I always forget the quote. So we'll pull up the map and we'll grab the city. He said something, Poznan. He said if they were to, I think it was Poznan, probably pronouncing it wrong. Anyway, he said if Russia were to attack Poland with a nuclear weapon, there would be no retaliation because no one would sacrifice Paris or New York for Poznan. And that's terrifying, but true. That's why I do not believe in mutually assured destruction. I think it's a made-up thing. The idea is if anybody launches an ICBM at somebody else, then it's just nukes flying in every direction. I don't believe it. I don't. Because if Russia were to say we're going to nuke Warsaw, sure, there'd be war declared against them, but they would not respond by just firing a bunch of ICBMs into Russia to flatten and turn them to glass. Because Russia would respond by firing nukes in every direction. Nobody's going to do it. This idea, it's just not real. I don't think so. And people tell me I'm wrong and I'm crazy, but I just don't believe it. If Russia were to use nukes in Eastern Europe, the West is going to try to infiltrate and seize control and stop them from launching more. No one's going to sacrifice Berlin, Paris, London, or DC or New York for Poznan. Now, should Russia launch intercontinental ballistic missiles against a more valuable target, then you may just see, then I agree. The point is, many people believe, one, that nuclear weapons just means firing nukes, ICBMs. It doesn't. It could be artillery. It could be dirty bombs. It could be a lot of things. Who knows? There's many different types of nuclear weapons. Many people believe that if somebody launches an ICBM, it's just everybody firing at each other. Not the case. If they nuke Poland, what country is going to be like, I guess we'll fire all our nukes and then we'll get wiped out too? They're going to be like, no, we don't want to be involved in that. It really depends on what the target is. Now, my friends, I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is the escalation is happening. Donald Trump is about to, in less than 2 months, Donald Trump will be the president. And hopefully he puts a stop to this. But here's hoping. In the meantime, I hope you're paying attention. I'll leave it there. Smash that like button. Share the show with everyone you know. Become a member over at timcast.com. More segments to come. Thanks for hanging out. And we'll see you all in the next segment.